Let's go back to the reality of the Middle East war, where missiles have been raining down on both Israel and Iran. We don't hear so much about Iranian society, the people under attack there, many of whom have never been fans of this regime. I'm joined now by Maryam Namazie, the writer and women's rights campaigner who was born in Tehran but whose family left after the 1979 revolution. Maryam, thank you very much for joining me. It's fair to say, isn't it, that below, as it were, the crust of the mullahs and the Islamic State, there is still a very vibrant, very sophisticated Iranian society we hear very little about in the West?
Yes, well, I think the West has become familiar with especially the woman-led freedom revolution in Iran that has been women-led, that has been led by Generation Z. And it's a movement that is secular, that is modern, that demands civil rights and doesn't want theocracy. And as you said, you know, this attack on the Islamic regime of Iran is something that, especially when it's the killing of, for example, officials of the regime, there are people who feel pleased to hear that, but we shouldn't ignore the fact that it is also a very worrying time for the people in Iran because they are not having any sort of a system that protects and defends them, because the regime is used to suppressing and killing its population rather than defending and protecting them. So there is no usual press conference or guidance or even sirens of mobile phones telling people or warning people in advance. They had a very sophisticated system to, for example, arrest women who didn't properly veil, for example, but that system doesn't work when it comes to trying to protect civilians. So I think we are very, very concerned at the moment. And there has been loss of civilian life, which is very worrying, especially given the escalation.
Of course. And I was saying right at the top of the show, we saw Iranian state television being basically blown off air, which is also disorientating. But I'm really interested, you know, we're familiar with your movement, or many people are, and I've been watching kind of little films all day of Iranian women and girls taking off their head covering and sort of talking to the camera directly and rather bravely. But the big question is whether the humiliation the regime has gone through over the past couple of days is sufficient to actually replace the regime. Is this a moment where Iranian society is brave enough, is big enough, is powerful enough to rise up against the mullahs?
I think Iranian society is brave enough and has shown their bravery over many decades. Unfortunately, I think the Iranian regime has been supported, including by Western governments, and that has been part of the problem. And also, I think we have to remember that Israeli state's attack on Iran is not necessarily going to end in a positive way. We see before our very eyes what's happened in Lebanon, what's happened in Gaza. And I think, and generally we've seen how interventions in our region from Iraq to Afghanistan, how they haven't really benefited civilians. So I think, you know, this is a war between two very reactionary forces that are on the one hand supported by Russia and Islamist movements, the other hand supported by Western governments. And I think it has a very dangerous it could have very dangerous consequences for the region. It could fragment Iran. It could have a very dark and bleak scenario, more so than it even has today. And so I think it's really urgent that all efforts are made to stop the war. I think people in Iran will get rid of this regime, but that has to be done by the people of Iran and not from above, and not by war, and not by the murder of civilians and the destruction of Iranian society.
A very important message, Maryam Namazie. Thank you so much for talking to LBC.